I told you guys about today's guest. Well, here she is. In my opinion, and in most, boxing's best photographer, the beautiful Emily Harney joins us right now. Emily, how you doing, girl?
I'm great. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well.
I think
Uh,
it's been about 6 years to the day since I've been on this show.
what is it? 6 years?
I think 6 years. I think it was right before COVID.
Oh man. Well, I'll tell you. I was thinking of you. I think of you, but I mean, today, knowing that you were on the show, I was thinking of all those times we woke your butt up so early in the morning. And I have some questions towards that, but you're not going anywhere for a little bit, so let's talk. And all kidding aside, you are, in my opinion, the best photographer. I've seen some great shots that you've taken, and every time I see a really good boxing photo, I always see your name on it. I'm like, oh yeah,
Thank you.
of course
I
it's that.
appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
You've been taking these shots for a long time. You've been in the business for a long time, and I wanted to ask you, how has it changed in terms of the cameras you're using? I remember the first time I met you, had this huge camera. So how has it changed? And not only with the cameras that you use, but also the way you get the photos to the promoters or whoever you're shooting for.
Yeah, when I first started shooting boxing, I was shooting film. I was in college, so I was working on a thesis, and I was shooting film. Digital wasn't even really a thought in our minds in terms of getting cameras at that point. The only person I knew who had a digital camera in the early 2000s was the Celtics photographer at the time, and it was a pretty crappy camera. And just as I got out of college, things started to change a little bit, and I knew I needed to get to the digital side, just in terms of getting things out financially. Film was expensive, but I can't tell you how much I appreciate learning on film, because you couldn't see what you were actually getting. So you hoped, and it wasn't until you were in the dark room, if you were developing your own film, which I was, that you would see, what we like to say, the magic happen, and realize that maybe you got what you hoped you got, but you weren't really truly sure until you actually, made a print. So the process of photography has certainly changed, but the way in which I shoot hasn't. I'm still thinking mechanically about how the camera works. I'm still thinking compositionally, which is super important when you're trying to make what I like to say is art. Photography and hasn't been represented as art for many years. A lot of people probably don't realize that, but we're painting a canvas with light. So it's important to understand the technology. A lot of people think they can grab a $5,000 camera and make beautiful photos. I like to tell them, well, if that's the case, then I'd love to have the same ink that Hemingway wrote with so that I'm a better writer. Because you do have to know what you're doing. You do need to know what ISO is. That's not a word. I hear somebody say that. I know that they've probably learned stuff on YouTube. But even my students, I teach high school, and even my students, they know that they could go backwards from shooting digital if they had to. So the technology has improved the quickness of getting photos out. I never thought I'd be somebody getting photos out from ringside, but I am. Directly from my camera to my phone to my editor or to wherever it needs to go. So working in real time has definitely changed the way I work. And of course, that depends on who you're working for too, who you're shooting for, and what you need to get out right away versus who can wait until Monday or Sunday or whatever it is when they go to publication. But a lot of people want to be first at getting work out, and I understand that, but I think it's important to get good quality workout and be truthful about what's being put out there. I've taken flack from fighters, not a lot of fighters, but, one in particular who called me a bad word years ago for a photo I took. I'm just doing my job. My goal is to paint the canvas with truth. And that's what a photograph is supposed to do. I think a lot of people worry about AI, but AI can only grab what it has access to. So if it's not out there, it's not accessible. So AI is also very male dominated, which is really interesting, and that's based on the information that it can pull. But it's still not what is being built in my head, you know? So when I'm making a photograph or I'm at a fight, I'm still trying to construct something or hoping for something that might happen and looking. And AI can't do that for you. So I'm not concerned with that part of the change up.
You reminded me. I mean, some of the shows that I did in the early 2000s, that's exactly what we used to have to do. You have somebody taking photos, then you have to have them go develop. So you don't even know what photos you have yet, And do you find yourself anticipating that next photo during shooting? Like, you're watching a fight, you might feel that knockout punch is coming, so you're getting ready for it, right?
Yeah, of course. You have to try to anticipate it because you can't just hold down the shutter and hope for the best. Timing is everything, no matter what part of boxing you're in. And understanding the fighter too. The more fighters I cover, the better I understand them. So certain fighters I've worked for with their entire career, and you can kind of anticipate certain things, but also boxing is unpredictable, right? Like we've seen so many things go the other way. I've seen guys win in the fight, and then they're losing the fight, and then they're winning the fight, and then they're getting knocked down, and then all of a sudden they knock the other guy down. So there are those moments that you are unprepared for, but you have to be prepared for. So you're always looking. I can't be a fan. I'm behind my camera like, come on, let's go. I need you to win. But I can't be a fan. I have to be paying attention to everything, including a little kid behind me that's screaming for their dad or their mom or their uncle or whoever it might be, because those make great photos too.
Yeah. Sometimes at those shows, it's so hard to not be a fan for me, I mean, it really is, but when you're shooting a fight, you're normally on the ring apron. I'm always so jealous. And you're obviously able to get some great shots. But are you watching the fights too? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
are you able to watch it and give a comment on it?
So it depends on the fight, right? Like there are some fights that I'm like, whoa, what did I just watch? When I hear the scores, and then I'll go back and I'll watch it and I go, okay, all right, I get it. There are other times that I've been so intensely working on what's happening and making sure that I get what I need, because also if that fight ends in the first round and I don't have anything, I get to hope that I have a safe shot, and that's one thing about boxing that, you have to make sure you get that walkout. You make sure that you get that corner shot, the Vaseline going on the face, the hug, the look to the audience, whatever it is, to make sure you have all of that. But there are times where I'm like, yeah, this person absolutely won that fight. And then there are other times I'm like, I have no clue. Because I think it depends on the intensity of the fight too. And also sometimes if I'm working for the person, I want to make sure that I give them the best of what I can. So I try not to be concerned with who's winning or who's losing or any of that. Just make work.
What's in your opinion, what's the biggest or best fight that you shot?
There's a lot of them. I mean, they're for different reasons, right? I still go back to the one that changed my life, which was Ward Gotti 1, the fight that I was not supposed to be at. When I went to the gym probably a month before to drop off photos, I had finished my thesis. Both Mickey and Dickie were like, "You're not coming? What are you talking about? Like, of course you're coming to this fight. Just put in your credential, show up to this fight." And I did, and I'm glad that I did, because that fight, it changed how I looked at boxing. It changed how I looked at the camaraderie of fighters, even though their friendship hadn't budded as much as it did, in the future. Just to see what those guys were able to do to each other and still withstand and then stand up and hug it out at the end, right? I had never experienced that. I had only been in boxing for about a year and a half, so it was all new to me. And growing up watching other sports, you saw that camaraderie, but you didn't watch people getting beat up. I never watched boxing as a kid. So to see these two men go in there and beat the pants off of each other and hug it out at the end was a beautiful thing to me. So that fight is still, it looms in my mind. But Taylor Serrano, the first one, being in the garden and hearing the garden roar like that, just as a female who's been in boxing for 25 years, boxing, I can name 3 promoters right now back in my early days who said women's boxing will never take off. Every one of those promoters right now are promoting women in some way, shape, or form. And they were absolutely wrong. That the way it sounded in the garden that night was like, I mean, for me, like I was just there to shoot it, right? I can imagine for the 2 of them and all the other women on that card, all the women that came after them. I mean, that was amazing. The fight itself was amazing too, but just to hear that.
Oh, I know. There's nothing like going, all sporting events. I tell people all the time there's really nothing like boxing,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I always throw in, and you got to be ringside, I mean, because that's a big difference too, and I've become a boxing snob. Like, hey, I got tickets. It's okay.
But I will say, like, as a photographer, sometimes, and I love being ringside, but it's a different perspective from when you're in auxiliary. A little less pressure in some respects, but also a different vantage point. That's when I find myself watching more of the fight versus ringside. So if I'm in auxiliary, I get a better idea of who won, believe it or not, because I think I can watch it a different way.
You know what? I don't mean to interrupt you, but that makes so much sense because of what I always say about judges, right? And whether people realize this or not, normally Emily is stationed in a spot. She gets a spot ringside, right? So just like a judge who's got his spot, and you're watching the fight from that viewpoint, sometimes you don't see what you may see if you were on the other side in the other spot, So I would imagine that shooting from an auxiliary, which generally is further away, not, ringside, that you would be able to see the whole fight almost like you're watching it on TV.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously there are still things that you don't see, but you do get a cleaner idea of what's landing. That's what I always find fascinating. I'm listening to people around me like, ooh, and I'm like, oh yeah, that didn't land. That went
right.
Exactly. I'm not going to tell you that today. He missed that like 9 shots.
That's why I hate punch stats, because you got some guy sitting there that may be scoring a punch that did not land or was blocked or.
And I think that's important too to remind, I always remind fans, like the fighter isn't the one judging this too. You know what I mean? Like, don't get on the other fighter for winning. Like, they didn't make the decision. They just went in there and did their job, and the judge saw it wrong. Sorry.
You and I have both covered a lot of Jimmy Birchfield's cards over the years. And, I love Jimmy, and he's one of the few grassroots promoters left. I mean, in our area here, I mean, you got Jimmy, you have Joe DeGuardia, right? Used to have a bunch in the New England area. I call Bobby Hitz a grassroots guy as well. Can boxing survive without guys like them?
No, you need those guys. I think I listen to people go, oh, Zuffa this, Zuffa that. You still need the small guy. Even if you look at what UFC has done, right? You still need these MMA local promoters to keep these guys fighting. And then they get called up to the UFC and they fight on a UFC card. Maybe they win, maybe they don't. And then they're back fighting around here on a local MMA card and whatnot. You still need these small guys. Like everything else, every few years we get something that comes into boxing. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I'm on the fence about all of this. I think there's potential there, but I think as you start to see it work for some fighters and not work for other fighters, as it does when they sign with big promoters all the time, it still comes down to what do you do as the fighter? What are you investing in yourself? Because as great as it is to sign with Zuffa, did they do PR on you? Did they hit up your local news? Are they doing that every week? No, probably not. Just like every other promoter. So you as the fighter still have to invest in yourself. You still have to grassroots yourself. And that's not just on social media. That means that you have to hire some PR. You have to invest in photos. You don't get to just steal them. But the reality is if I hate to say this, but you kind of have to be like a politician, and I've said that before, I think, on this show. You have to like market yourself, but again, off of social media as well, because your local news is still there. Your local news is still important. Get you on television. We have 4 or 5 local news stations around here. Every once in a while, you see boxing. And that's because somebody has a good PR person, probably by the name of Bob Trieger, who's great out here. Little plug there for him. But in all seriousness, that's how you get your name out there. You look at the guys like Mickey Ward who are still relevant. It's a tribute to what their PR team did for them back in the day, because their names still come up. There are still local reporters that have been around for a while. There aren't many of them, but there are still staff reporters who will cover boxing if they know about it. But you have to kind of give them a shell, right? They need like some sort of PR to go off of. Oh, okay, here's this new group putting out a show. You still got to do that kind of stuff. It's great that you sell out, but you still have to promote your fighters, and the fighters have to get out and market themselves.
All right. 2 things. First of all, Bob Trieger, the best, man. I love Bob. I got to get him back on the show.
Yeah, you do.
He's
right down the street. He moved to Salem. He became a Salem witch a few years ago. It's amazing.
I know, but he, last time I saw him at a show, he was like, yeah, I don't really go to the shows much anymore. I'm like, well, what am I going to see?
He's got guys all over the place. So
no, I know. The other thing is I'm prepared. I mean, I have a list of questions, and you just jumped ahead, okay? Because I was going to bring up. You must be. I was going to bring up Zuffa Boxing. So now you opened up a can of worms, because, yes, it is, and it was exactly what I was thinking, a segue from, the Jimmy Birchfields, okay? Now, it's a different animal, and this is what I think that, and this is no knock on grassroots promoters, because I believe that they will survive. I just don't think there's enough of them left, and I think the sport has made it that way, because without Jimmy and the guys I mentioned, Jimmy, Bobby Hitz, and Joe DeGuardia, they have a nucleus. They have people that back them, and they can afford to do these shows. Not every small promoter does. And without any other revenues coming in, if you have to actually go out and sell tickets like Jimmy does, it's hard to survive. So with that said, all the other promoters have tried, and the sanctioning bodies have tried to emulate that UFC model, right? Because of the success. Now, with Dana White, I think Zuffa Boxing is going to be good for the sport. I think the promoters will all be able to work together. I think the odd people out are going to be the sanctioning bodies. And for the purists, I think what's going to evolve are better fighters, because the protection of the fighters won't be as obvious. I mean, look at the heavyweight Moses Ituma, right? They're already putting him in the Hall of Fame. He's got one fight against a notable guy that people question. They question the validity of the fight. Yeah. I mean, I'm just calling it like it is. I mean, at least with Zuffa Boxing, at least what they're saying is going to happen is that they're going to be climbing the ladder. So, like in a sense, number 8 guy's got to fight number 7 guy. If he wins, he moves up the ladder, So at the end of the day, when you get a champion who's fought some fights, lost a couple, he's up there now, he's going to be a damn good fighter. Today we see champions, they got 12, 15 fights, and they're not that good, Emmett.
Yeah, no, I agree. Since I've come into boxing, I don't think I can count anymore how many sanctioning bodies we have, and even to the point some days I hear it in school and I'm like, did you just talk about a sanctioning body? Like, what were those 3 letters you just said? And, it's the same letters, but it means something totally different in education. But, we talk about the alphabet.
You mean acronyms?
The
Like,
acronyms,
that's
the
funny.
acronyms that some people think are words too. So we have become a little maybe sanctioning body happy. And one of the things I've learned over the years is how easy it kind of is to start a sanctioning body.
Or get a belt.
Or get a belt, right. And, unfortunately, I think we both know people who have, had 3 or 4 fights, and then all of a sudden they're fighting for this major belt, and you're like, how did we get here? Do you have a different name that I don't know about? And you fought all these fights, but that's not usually the case. And so I think we do need to clean that up. I don't see a reason not to do that. Right. I think what people start to get nervous about is one entity, right? And moving everything out of their space. You lose your local shows, your local fighters end up fighting in Vegas.
Why do you think they would lose the local shows?
No, I'm saying that's what I think people fear with Zuffa coming in, that they're just going to wipe everything up, right? And it didn't happen with MMA when UFC came in, because you still, like I said, you still need those smaller guys to continue those shows, to build the smaller guy, right? If you have a guy coming out of the amateurs, Zuffa isn't going to necessarily sign him right away. Maybe he will. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. But you got to build that fighter. Do you have a ticket seller? Do you have a kid that can even really fight? You don't want to just be signing people left and right based on, who they've either fought in the amateurs or, just a couple fights in. You want to see what they can actually do. Is it a fluke thing? And can you continue to sell tickets? Because you still need people to come and see them, right? Like, as much as Vegas is maybe filling the seats right now, I'm not really sure. I can't really get a look at the crowd there. You still need to build your fighter. And so who's going to do that? You need the smaller promoters to do that. We are lucky enough to have a couple new promoters around here in New England. And again, I go back to the idea of having somebody who does PR, so that more people know about them. They do have to invest in the PR, but we're watching, guys like the Nolan brothers put together some really great shows around here. With local guys, and starting to build up, where you see that, is it number 8 in Massachusetts fight the number 7 in Massachusetts. So, you're seeing those good fights kind of come about where we're not calling people in from who knows where to come and, take a fight, and we get to see 19 seconds. So, we still are getting some of the great grassroots.
But listen, what you're saying is even better, because, that's what it used to be like, those local rivalries. I talk about that all the time, right? Like, especially from a historical perspective, there was always these local rivalries first. And then you would get a guy from, let's say, a couple of kids from Massachusetts are fighting, and all of a sudden the Massachusetts, now he goes and fights in Rhode Island. Same situation with Rhode Island. So you got this. To me, that builds up a fighter who could eventually get those big dollar fights with any promoter. But with Zuffa, I think you're right. What could always happen is they sign. It's a league, so to speak. So they sign a contract, and if they get kicked out, it may open the door for other leagues. So maybe we'll see like a reorganization of. I'm just kind of glad that we may see less belts. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I still think it's important to have sanctioning bodies. You look at the history of boxing. It's important to identify who those champions are. And if you want to have a couple belts, trying to unify it. But do we need 19 belts?
No.
Do we? And when you do have 19 belts, those guys aren't fighting each other. You see the girls fight each other more often, which is wonderful because they seem to, yeah, sure, let's fight. But with the guys, and again, no knock on them, because I think it comes down to negotiations and business and, what's on the table and who's paying for what and why am I paying a fee for this? So there are questions there too, but we don't need 19 belts, 3, 4.
Yeah, but don't forget, each one also has an interim, also has you know, a recess champion.
A valet.
Okay, so Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao's having a second fight. It's happening. You know, I mean, Floyd's going to be pushing 50. Both of them are pushing 50. What's your thoughts? I mean, I'm not going to even put you on the spot with Mayweather Tyson because I know how you feel about that. Because I know how I feel. But Mayweather Pacquiao, what do you think? I mean,
both of them supposedly have, exhibition fights they need to get through first, right? And then we need to get to September if those exhibition fights are really happening for both of them.
But it seems that Manny is fighting a real. They're both exhibitions, right?
They're both exhibitions, right?
But one, Floyd's fighting Mike Tyson, but we all know Mike Tyson has admitted, "Hey, I'll take the money. I don't care.
Just don't hit me in some spots."
Yeah. Well, no, they're not going to let him hit. He's not allowed to hit. You'll see him chewing up his gloves again. But
I just remember returning to work after the first fight and people saying, "You work in boxing, and I spent that much money on that fight. Can I get my money back?" Are we going to get the same thing again? And I don't know, make the undercard amazing, then great, I'm on board. But I don't see that happening.
Yeah, it was definitely, the fight was the first one was definitely, first of all, it took place 5-6 years too late then.
Right.
And it was anticlimactic. I did an event for that fight, and it was there were actually people in there, and I still hear to this day that and I will admit I was rooting for Manny Pacquiao, but he didn't win the fight. Floyd won the fight, and there's people saying, "No, Manny won," but anyway,
they must have been sitting in the tent with us.
Well, it's the same thing when Floyd fought Connor, right? We did an event down south, and there was a guy in there. And for some reason I lost access to my own chat room here, and there was there's a guy in there that was there. I know, Max, if you're still in there. But anyway, they had a guy at the place that was taking bets. He was taking whoever would bet him. He wanted Connor. It was the whole crowd was filled with MMA guys, all actually thinking that Conor McGregor was going to beat Floyd, But lastly, Emily, you were part of this show when we were on 5 days a week. We had a lot of fun back there. And back then, I should say, and, I was on networks and all of that stuff. Today, there's tons of shows out there. Without naming any, what's your thoughts on the shows? Because in my opinion, there's not really any good shows. It's like the way I look at trainers. We have rah-rah men today. We don't have real trainers that, we actually saw that in the what was it? What fight was that? Where he was getting no instruction in the corner.
I've seen that quite a few times.
No, a lot, but this was a high profile. I think it was the Ortiz fight. I think it was Shakur Stevenson. Yeah. I
didn't watch the fight after. I was at the fight, but I didn't watch it afterwards, and I do remember somebody commenting on that.
Yeah, I think it was that one. But anyway, I know that there's a ton of shows out there, and I know there's a lot of people talking about boxing, but I don't think they really know the sport. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think some people are great at talking. I think they can, pull information from what they find online and go, okay, I can talk about that, and I can, work the camera and whatnot. It's like good weathermen, and weatherwomen, they can work the green screen, but they have no idea what's really happening out in the forecast.
This isn't a green screen,
I don't see any weather there, so I got you. It's all good.
You don't see the images.
No, we're cool. No, but I think it's important to not just talk about big fights, right? I always hear people go, "Oh, I cover boxing, and I'm a boxing this, and I'm boxing that," and I'm like, "Oh, what shows do you go to?" "Oh, the big ones." But you live in a city that, and I'm you, I'm just saying this particular people, they live in cities where they have shows every weekend and they're not big shows. And I said recently to somebody, you don't have to be at a masterful show to make a masterpiece. You know, there are incredible fights that happen in a lot of the smaller venues that I think are important for people to go to, so you really understand how this operation works, first of all. I think there are a lot of people who cover boxing who don't know the business of boxing. And I think there are a lot of fighters who still don't know the business of boxing. You know, I always tell fighters when they ask me, like, what's your advice? Know what's going on in your own career. Don't rely on the people that are in your corner to do all your work for you, because you should know what's on the table. You should know what's being offered to you. And I think good reporters should also know that as well, you know, because when you do show up to those, I hate to call them smaller shows, but they are smaller shows, right? The club
I call
shows.
club shows.
Yeah, club shows. You learn so much about boxing. You learn about the history of boxing. You get to sit next to people who have been there for 60, 70 years. You know, there's a couple guys, Jimbo Curran is one of them. I sit next to him any chance I get to talk boxing, because I feel like I'm sitting in a history class and I don't even really have to ask questions. He just shares. And that's a beautiful thing to me. But you don't always get that at the bigger shows. And I think, again, what you see for a lot of boxing coverage is big shows where people are kind of missing the mark of how did these people get here, you know? If I can get into a gym, I like to get into a gym too, to also get the feel for what's happening, because I think you get more of a perspective, not on a media day in a gym, but on a regular day when somebody's training, to understand what this person is really going through. And I think it makes you appreciate what you talk about when you talk about that person too. So just getting to know really the beginnings of where these individuals come from, and not just assuming that you can go to a big show and it's all going to be fabulous for you.
No, I hear you. That's for sure. There's a lot of experts out there, self-proclaimed. Are you going to be up at Turning Stone this Saturday?
Not this Saturday. No, I will not be up there.
Oh.
I wish. I love Turning Stone.
Oh yeah, no, I'm going to be. There's a good card. I'm going to be. I thought maybe I'd get to see you in person again.
Nope, nothing out here until I think end of March. Jimmy Birchfield's doing a show, actually really close to my home in Beverly, at the Music Theater, which is pretty cool.
I know, it's 4 hours. Yeah. I was going to go because oh geez, Amalia
Yes.
Moore.
Yes,
Amelia Moore. She's going to be on the show before that.
She's awesome.
Yeah, no, I love her. She was great. She was actually on the show, and now I think she's fighting for a title on that card.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I wanted to go, but I punched it up. I'm like, man, that's 4.5 hours from me. You know, it's like
4.5 hours, but you get to drive to Emily Harneyville. We can go to the Anka. We can have some good fish. If Glenn Feldman is in town, he'll go to the Anka with us and have some good fish. Maybe a lobster.
I'm a steak guy.
You can get a steak at the.
You know, the thing is I was talking. I'm like, all right, is there any place close, like, a nice, like, I like, I'm kind of wimpy. I like nice hotels. I was like, is there a place? Maybe I will take a ride. So it's not etched in stone yet, but
listen, we can get you into
having dinner sounds a little better.
We'll get you to the Hawthorne Hotel in Salem. We won't put you on the haunted floor.
Yeah, that's right. The last time you were telling me about Salem, you were telling me all about the haunted stuff. People come from all over to see. Yeah, I don't know. But anyway.
We'll take care of you if you decide to come up, Billy C.
I will. I definitely will. Emily, thank you so much for coming on. And we got to have you back on again anytime you want. Just let me know.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Be good. I'll see you soon ringside.
You too. Thank you.
That's Emily Harney, boxing's best photographer, and I'm not kidding. If next time you see a photo on the internet or anywhere, look and see who took it. I guarantee you're gonna see Emily's name. All right.